We're coming to you from the DraftKings.com podcasting studios. DraftKings.com, America's one-day fantasy sports site, where it's like a new season every time you play. DraftKings.com.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Shannon, apparently while I was on vacation, Steve Sarkisian lost his mind up in here. Do I have that right?
Got a little loose with it.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. Got a little loose with it. Drank a little bit too much. Got in front of a bunch of people. Looked like somebody who drank a little bit. Shannon, weren't there kids there?
Yeah, were.
There were kids there. His players were there. Like the university community was there. There was cursing. He said, get ready to effing fight on, baby. And then that resulted in people putting like Steve Sarkisian bar tabs up on the internet showing him buying copious amounts of alcohol and the likes. And so there were questions as to whether or not Steve Sarkisian was going to be disciplined by USC for that. Now, remember, his situation didn't get totally out of hand. But, Shannon, I can name at least two coaches who lost their jobs because they went out and got loose with it. Gary Moeller at Michigan. Apparently, he went bananas.
He went in.
Yes, he went all the way in. And what's his name? Mike Price. Dude who took the Alabama job and never actually got to coach Alabama. Now, it should be noted, Mike Price sued Sports Illustrated and won. Like, Sports Illustrated had to pay out to him. So the details of that story, maybe not so, maybe not all as we remember, but he did get loose with it. There was no denying the fact that he got loose with it. So Sarkisian got loose with it. And did you see what Sarkisian's excuse was for how he got loose with it?
What'd he say?
He said it was a mixture of medication and alcohol that was partly to blame. But he said that he was going to treatment.
For the medication or for the alcohol?
I'm not sure for what. Like, what does treatment mean? Do you have a sprained ankle? Are you going to get, like, electrotherapy? Are they going to, what are you talking about? You're going to therapy. All I'm saying is this, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. If your response to an incident is that you need to go and get some therapy, or treatment, rather, how do you not get disciplined by your job? Because guess what? Generally speaking, you don't need to go to treatment until your boss tells you.
Right.
Like, that's the normal sign. Like, does he have a drinking problem? Well, he missed work yesterday. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't people who have drinking problems. Look, there are people who have drinking problems who somehow make it to work every day, right? But generally speaking, you don't wind up going to the treatment until your boss tells you to. That's normally how that winds up working out. So you gonna tell me that man acted like that in front of all of those people and he didn't get any sort of discipline? I think Pat Hayden joked that he was going to make Sarkisian do up-downs.
Yeah, because that's what apparently they left it up to the players to decide the discipline for Sarkisian, and they made him do up-downs, or it wasn't one of the disciplines for him.
Yeah, what are the players going to say? What are the players going to say? I think this is serious business and should be handled with this is real.
They should fine him.
Tell you this, though.
If he had a dirty locker.
Dirty locker, like your boys at Virginia Tech. But Foster thought he going to fine guys out of their cost of attendance money. Hey, you know what that money's for? Attendance. That's what it costs. That's why they call it cost of attendance money, bud. Anyway, here's my question for you. If one of Sarkisian's players had gotten up behind that microphone and behaved as such, is there a suspension? What you got?
Absolutely.
All right, so you're going to have to explain to me how it is that the coach does it. And the players were there, you have to remember. Like, it's not like they just got some wind of it or something like that. They were right there. How do you have a higher standard of behavior for the teenagers than you do for the grown-up? How? But this is a common thing in college sports, right? You want to treat them like kids when it's time to pay them. But whenever they make mistakes, then you want to treat them like adults. But Steve Sarkisian makes this mistake, and you treat him like a kid. So I need you to let me know how exactly that works. How that goes. right? Now, if Sarkisian needs help, I hope he gets the help. If he needs help, I hope he gets the help. But you can't show up like drunk at work like that. You can't show up. If you show up at work, if he were to show up at the facility like that with nobody around, y'all got to have a nice long talk with him, right? Pat Hayden has got to call him upstairs to have a nice long talk about what's going on with him, right? He did this in front of people, families.
I was going to say that there were player families there. There were boosters, alums, the whole nine. This is more than just doing it in front of your boss. This is doing it in front of your boss and the important people.
And they just laughed it off. Must be nice, huh?
That's like showing out in front of company.
Right.
You're not about to embarrass me out here.
But Sarkisian, it's like nothing ever happened. I don't know about you, Shannon, but it must be nice, huh? I don't know nothing about that life. You know anything about that life?
Nope.
I don't know anything about that life. Like, I'm listening to this.
Must be nice.
Must be nice. Now, one thing I want you to remember, by the way, about USC, because Pat Hayden, I feel like, gets to skate on a lot of stuff as the athletic director, because they ran Mike Garrett out of there, right? And it was understandable why they ran Mike Garrett out of there. The probation came down, and on his way out the door, Mike Garrett, who, don't forget, won a Heisman Trophy at USC, he sent the ultimate middle finger to the NCAA, which was hiring Lane Kiffin as the probation was on the way, like the guy who was involved in the probation. And people talk about what a train wreck it was with Mike Garrett, how everything went out of control when Mike Garrett was in charge. And, hey, I think it's fair to make those points, right? The O.J. Mayo thing happened under his watch, all of that. That's cool. However, when it came time to hire a head coach, who did Pat Hayden hire? He hired Sarkisian, who was also there when everything went bad, who was also there when everything was out of control.
Details, bro, details.
Yeah, right. And now he's the dude getting up in front of a bunch of people, drunk as Cootie Brown, cussing in front of people's mamas. And when it comes time to talk about whether or not to do something, it's time to – Hayden had to pull him off the stage. Like, how drunk do you have to be for people to finally be – when your boss has to come be Sandman Sam, how badly are you performing right now? Do. How bad are you acting when your boss has to be your Sandman? But, hey, like I say, if that was a player in that same situation, you better bet that he would have wound up getting suspended. But it wasn't a player. It was just a grown man making millions of dollars. No big deal, right?
Bomani.
Our next guest, he's a columnist at the Washington Post, which means he's got a front row seat for all that drama. His name is Jerry Brewer. Jerry, what's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be on the show. I'm proud of you, man.
Hey, man, thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you joining us. I have to ask you this, because you were in Seattle before you got to Washington. Like, you were covering Super Bowl champions. Now you're covering Washington. Like, what kind of change is that as somebody working?
I try to tell everyone that I came here to get the NBA back and some other options. It wasn't just that I got tired of covering Super Bowls and I decided to do this, but it's pretty dramatic now that football season has hit. You can't believe that the Redskins are dysfunctional as they are. And coming off of the Seahawks, who they're kind of crazy themselves, but they always seem to be doing things the right way. I mean, it's pretty much just a flabbergast moment after flabbergast moment this preseason for me.
All right, now you wrote a very good column about Jay Gruden, and now that Robert Griffin is not the starter, all the attention now goes to Jay Gruden, which led me to think about something. We nationally have not talked about a single thing on this team other than the quarterback situation. Like, is there anything to be optimistic about that we're just unaware of?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things. I think poaching Bill Callahan from the Dallas Cowboys and some of the emphasis that they put on offensive line play should eventually bear fruit in terms of having a solid run game at some point this season if they stick to the run. And then the other thing they did, bringing in pot roast Terrence Knighton and bringing in a lot of other solid pieces, Stephen Paya among them. Their defensive line is much improved, and I think particular in the area of run defense, that might actually wind up being the strength of this team this year. So I think you're going to see a more physical team, a team that competes harder for four quarters, but it still comes back to they're not talented enough overall, and the quarterback situation is still such a mystery, and the expectations are so low that you can't really think that this is going to be one of the surprise teams in the league. But very subtly, I do think they are going to be better than they've been the last couple of years.
Well, they also got Jim Haslett out of there. Like, I know you may not want to be so quick to say that, but I hear everything about the defense getting better. I'm like, they also have a new defensive coordinator, which can't hurt.
Yes, absolutely. There's no question about that. But the problem is their secondary is suspect at best, and it could be atrocious. And that's what potentially can hold them back this year on defense.
All right, talking to Jerry Brewer of the Washington Post. Now, talking about them offensively, one thing we haven't seen them with this preseason has been Deshaun Jackson. That deep threat has not been there. How much do they expect that that'll make things better once the season starts?
Oh, I think they're really, really banking on a big year from Deshaun. I think he's he had a 1,000-yard season among all the chaos with playing with three different quarterbacks a year ago. He is one of the better deep threat receivers in the game. So yeah, I think if you put him out there with a possession receiver like Pierre Garçon, they can do some things if they're competent at quarterback, and we'll see if Kirk Cousins can keep the interceptions down and if he can play solid football, because one thing, regardless of who's playing quarterback this year, the plan has always been to simplify things for those guys. Run, throw deep to Deshaun. And if you are running the football effectively, that's a strategy that could bear some fruit. But once again, they're just so limited in what they do that you can't get overly excited about anything, including Deshaun Jackson.
Well, you mentioned optimism about the offensive line with Bill Callahan, but a lot of us saw what happened against the Lions, where Riley Sherf is getting just blown off his spot, and they were without Trent Williams in that game. But is there a legitimate reason for optimism aside from a new coach?
I think there is. I think Brandon Sheriff is going to be in time a good football player. Will he be good enough to look back and say he deserved the number 5 pick? I don't know. I've had those conversations with Scott McCloughan. He took a guard. They started him at right tackle, and within 2 weeks of training camp, they moved him to guard. And they're trying to say that's for the overall, to think about the offensive line as a whole, and they just work better as a unit putting other guys in there. But obviously, there's a lot of spin there. He has to become the best guard in the game and you still would say, why did you take a guard, number 5 overall? But I think he's ultimately going to be a good player. When Trent Williams is healthy and when Trent Williams is consistent, he's as good as any left tackle in the league, and he just got paid as the highest paid left tackle in the league. So he's got to produce. If you have those guys as bookend talents, I think you can manage some things in and around there as long as Morgan Moses at right tackle isn't a complete disaster. But there's a lot of question marks and a lot of things that line has to prove. I think they're starting – it's a little bit the Seattle approach. Can we do one thing right? Can we run the football? Can we move forward and impose our will on opponents? That's what they're looking for first. I think in terms of pass protection, it's going to be a mess early, and then maybe it might get to decent by the end of the season. But one of the reasons that they picked Kirk Cousins is one of the things he does, he gets rid of the ball quickly, and he tries his hardest not to take as many hits and as many sacks as Griffin, who was back there and sometimes didn't know what he was seeing and took the big hit when he could have avoided it in some cases.
All right, my apologies to Brandon Scherf, who I called Riley. I think they had an offensive lineman in Iowa before him named Riley. We're talking to Jerry Brewer of the Washington Post. You talked about the running the ball and Bill Callahan helping out with that, but Jay Gruden is thought of as a guy who wants to throw the ball around a lot. How dedicated do you think he'll be toward running the ball?
That's a great question, Bo, and it's one that a lot of people were frustrated with him last year, abandoning the run. You go back and you talk to people in Cincinnati, as successful as they were, and the good job that he did with Andy Dalton, they abandoned the run a lot there. And for this team to be successful, it just has to be ugly. and they have to try to win games 17-13, 20-17. It's all about, can you hold possession? Can you grind out games? Can you make it look ugly? And then in the fourth quarter, can you try to steal one? Don't make mistakes. I mean, it's a very bland style of football, and he's shown himself to be pass happy in the past. But when asked about that recently, Jay Gruden even referred to his wide receivers, talking about Garcon and Jackson, as bells and whistles. He's saying that what he wanted to do on offense more than anything this year was be physical, and he would worry about the bells and whistles later. So we'll see if he can live up to that.
Yeah, how do the bells and whistles feel about that one?
And the funny thing, the bells and whistles are still the most accomplished part of this football team. And that's always been an issue that we've kind of wondering, if they don't pass the ball with any type of efficiency or effectiveness this year, how much, those guys have stayed quiet for the most part, but we all know how wide receivers are, and will they stay quiet?
All right, talking to Jerry Brewer of the Washington Post, and your column about Jay Gruden was saying that Robert Griffin is not there, that the guy to blame is no longer there, so now everybody's looking at Jay Gruden. He signed a 5-year contract, so he's got a lot of money coming down the line from that franchise. How much pressure is he realistically under with this season pending?
I think some things really changed for him when they brought in Scott McCloughan, and if he simply develops the team in a manner that Scott McCloughan wants, and he's playing the players that Scott McCloughan thinks have the most talent, I think that's going to buy him a little time if the season's ugly, if they have another double-digit loss season. He can't survive 4-12, but I think there is a scenario in which 6-10 they would bring him back. And then once again, you're talking about a guy that has a 5-year contract guaranteed, and that's something that Bruce Allen did when he hired him, which seemed to make no sense to anyone, especially given Daniel Snyder's history of wanting to change head coaches every 2 years. We're talking about 8 head coaches in 16 years of ownership. So I think that Jay Gruden, if he has just a functional year, if you feel like he's developing players, I think then it becomes the big question. He's the next guy. I think making a football decision on Robert Griffin III was the first test of whether Daniel Snyder wants to do this in a different way than what he's done in the past. And then the next one is, will you stick with the coach who is helping develop the team, even though the results on the field don't come immediately?
All right, Jerry Brewer, he is a columnist for the Washington Post. Check his work out. Check his column out on Jay Gruden. My man, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
All right, anytime, man.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Will Smith going to make a football movie.
What position is he playing?
Neurosurgeon or neurologist. One of those.
Oh, wait. He's not going to be actually playing someone on the field?
Yeah, no, it's not like an actual movie about football. It's a movie about concussions. Like, the movie is called Concussion. Apparently it's directed by Ridley Scott. Shannon, I don't really do the movie thing very much, but I know his name. Apparently he's made a lot of movies, some of them fairly successful, from what I've been able to glean. And the movie is about a doctor named Bennett Omalu. And Omalu, basically, he's the guy who diagnosed CTE. Like, he's that dude. When it's time to check out those guys, he was that guy. He's drawn the link between playing football and CTE. Like, it's a big thing, right? The League of Denial thing that you may have seen on PBS that a lot of folks at Outside the Lines here worked on. That's him. That's the doctor. Now, I understand you may not have put the two and two together if you had seen League of Denial and you had seen the doctor, because he don't look nothing like Will Smith. But they want you to go see this movie, so they're going to put Will Smith in it. Shannon, I can't lie. I look at a picture of the good doctor here, and this looks like a role for Forrest Whitaker. You seen The Last King of Scotland? This dude look a lot more like Forrest Whitaker than he looks like Will Smith.
But in dude's defense, though, honestly, if they're making a movie about your life and you're alive and you're here to see it, don't you kind of handpick the actor that you want to play you?
I guess so. I'm saying, what's it say about him that he did not take Forrest Whitaker, who is a better actor and Academy Award winner for Best Actor? You know how hard it is for a Forrest Whitaker to win Best Actor? It's only happened like twice. And then came Forrest Whitaker. He had to be Idi Amin in order to get that, right? So he good enough to play the president of a country, but he can't play you, Doc? All right. See how you get down. By the way, judging for this picture in the New York Times, he's a forensic pathologist, by the way. And apparently he works very hard because the gentleman looks like he could use some sleep. Anyway, the movie is going to come out around Christmas, I believe, Shannon, because I don't know about you. I don't really feel like this is how I want to spend my Yuletide.
Not at all.
Talking about people suffering horrible deaths and being driven to suicide. Not really what I'm about.
No, ugly sweaters and presents for me. Thank you.
Yeah, you know who else isn't about, like, people thinking about horrible pain and driving people to suicide? The NFL. Like, they're not here for that sort of thing. That's why I was kind of shocked that this movie is being made. Like, Peter King put out a report about this concussion movie. There's a lot going on there that I thought would never, ever, ever happen. All right? A lot. But this is what's interesting, Shannon. I don't know if you saw this from the New York Times. You know, the hackers had gotten into the Sony emails.
Right.
And so they got into the Sony emails about this movie. And, man, Sony was so concerned about not offending the NFL. Woo! So concerned about not offending the NFL.
Whoa, NFL, don't worry. This is really not about you. It's about concussions.
Right. Like, we're not talking about the NFL squeezing them. Maybe there were some phone calls that these emails don't indicate, but they were really just like, yo, we cannot offend the NFL in the course of this. And the argument they made about not wanting to offend the NFL was basically, if this movie comes out and the NFL then launches what is effectively a counteroffensive, then what? All right? Now, Patrick Ruby, who writes for Vice Sports, a lot of other people, Patrick has seen the movie, and Patrick has said that it doesn't go easy on football or the NFL or anything else. Like, it doesn't do that. He says that if you want to see a movie that's going to be critical, this movie is still going to be critical. So he says that that's what it's going to be. But listen to this email, Shannon. We're just being smart because any large corporation will design a response to something it considers to be a threat to its existence. We don't want to give the NFL a toehold to say they're making this up and damage the credibility of the movie. Can you imagine how careful you have to be if you're working on the concussion movie?
Yikes.
Like, you got to be ready for anything that could come up. And it sounds like they went through every single step, just to make sure that nobody got offended. But there's another level to them making sure nobody got offended that I find to be most interesting. And the telephone number is 888-729-3776. They wanted, in making this movie, to be very, very sure that viewers understood that it was not an attack on football. Not the NFL, the sport of football, the very notion of football. So, yes, there were alterations made to the script. They want to make sure it's a whistleblower story and not a condemnation of football. Like, they're talking about doing stuff in the promotion, Shannon, like going so far as to make sure that people understood that Will Smith liked football and that one of his sons played football, because they don't want to offend anybody who thinks you might be saying something bad about football. Like, this isn't actually a religion, y'all. You guys understand this, right? Like, it's not actually a religion, because these are the kinds of concerns and care that people take toward not offending people's religions. This is football, right? But the NFL has done such a great job of this. Like, every time that somebody gets mad at the NFL for not letting dudes dance or not letting their uniforms be out of step or whatever it is, one thing you got to remember is people believe in the NFL in a way that they don't believe in these other leagues. And everything the NFL does is basically making sure that you understand that the NFL is America. Like, they are one and the same. That baseball was America's pastime stuff, that's not selling so well anymore. People don't buy into that anymore. American football, though. I mean, let's be clear about this. It's the only major American sport that is only really Americans. Like, when you look on the field, it's pretty much nothing but Americans. You'll get a smattering of guys from somewhere else, right. But there ain't a lot of Dirk Nowitzkis over here playing in the NFL. There's not a bunch of Hakeem Olajuwons. Ain't no Sergei Fedorovs, Henrik Lundqvist. They're not there in the NFL, right? There is no the Martinezes. I mean, there's some in the NFL but they're from America, right? This is America's game, and people really not everybody, but there are a lot of people who truly look at an attack on football as like an attack on American exceptionalism, and I am fascinated by the idea that people care that much about football, that you've got a movie like this. Look, no matter what you find out about CTE, y'all are going to watch football. We're not going to stop watching football. Now, what people are going to stop doing is letting their kids play football. But they're going to watch your kids play football if you let them. We watch football on every level. Grown-ups go to high school games. We do it on college. We are down to watch football no matter what. I don't think there's anything that they could put in that movie that would make people stop watching football. Nothing. Nothing at all, right? But what will make people not go watch this movie is if you make them feel bad about football. And that's what people don't want. That's the direction people don't want to go in. People don't want to have to think about this. But you know what? If they do, they'll still watch. It costs you nothing to watch it. Like, all the things that we see people do all the time and we don't do anything about, we don't say anything about, football might be kind of low on the list. Like, it's the guilty pleasure. And what's going to change really is in 30, 40 years, people are going to be like, look, I'm not letting my kids play this game, but if you want to send your kids out there to get their eggs scrambled, I love it. I find it to be highly entertaining. That's what it is. But in the meantime, we're not going to talk bad about America's game, because talking bad about America's game in a lot of people's eyes is talking bad about America.
This is America, Jack.
That's right. It ain't happening. It isn't. So, I'll be curious to see this movie when it comes out. I'll be curious to see what the reception of the movie is. I'll be curious to see how the people who watch it enjoy it, how the reviewers enjoy it, everything. Because this is a broadside on big business, whether they want it to be or not.
My whole thing is, if you're going to tackle this subject, why not go all in? I understand that you want to be sensitive to the issues with football and all of that, but if you're talking about CTE and it's based around the doctor who came up with this diagnosis, why not go all in and talk about the results of playing the head trauma and playing tackle football and things like that? Go all in.
Well, part of why not, because this ain't no documentary and that ain't no public trust. These are people trying to make some money off a movie. And never forget that when you watch it. It is a bunch of people trying to make money off of a movie.
Bomani.
Shannon, I was going to ask if you watch Hard Knocks, but we don't watch Hard Knocks because we do a television show. A radio program.
This little operation that we have going on here.
Yeah, like if you watch a Hard Knocks right now, I think you need to stop. That's right. Put the TV on mute. Don't need to see that. Anyway, Texans owner Bob McNair today was on the radio in Houston, and he was asked about the Tom Brady investigation. And, well, it's interesting because the host, his name is Mike Meltzer at 610 Sports at Houston. And he asked Bob McNair whether or not he would feel the same way he does, which is in support of the investigation, in support of Roger Goodell. Mike asked him if he would feel the same if it was about J.J. Watt. Shannon, you ready to hear what that man said?
I can only imagine.
Here's what he said. If it was J.J. Watt, I think he would have been cooperative, and it wouldn't be a question. I don't think J.J. would destroy his cell phone. Woo, that sound like shade to you, Shannon?
Wow.
Yeah. On one hand, it's shade to Tom Brady. But on the other hand, that's a salute to Captain America, J.J. Watt. Yes, sir. That's what we had. Now, here's the thing, Shannon.
I didn't know if you knew this. I don't know if you knew this, but J.J. Watt is a member of G.I. Joe now. It's a real American hero. All these stories that you hear, it's right up there with Paul Bunyan. He's there.
He is Paul Bunyan. Like, that's where I like to call him Paul Bunyan. He's absolutely Paul Bunyan. He's from Wisconsin, too. Like, he's totally Paul Bunyan. Now, Tom Brady, says he did not destroy his cell phone. He just wasn't coming off his cell phone. And you know who else isn't coming off their cell phone? Anybody. Anybody at all. None of us are coming off the cell phone. Nobody, right? J.J. Watt, let me tell you something. Let's just assume that all the stuff that they want to tell us about J.J. Watt is true, right? Let's all assume that J.J. Watt is like the greatest man in the history of mankind, and he does no wrong, and is the walking embodiment of everything positive about America, right? Let's just say that that's true. Go ask him for a cell phone right now and see how that works out. See how that goes.
Go ask him to check his direct messages.
Yeah, right in front of you. Ask him to do that in your face. No, man, he's not doing it. And I'm not saying that makes J.J. Watt any kind of fraud or phony. I'm saying that makes J.J. Watt an American. I ain't turning over my phone to you. What are you, crazy? That never goes well. Let me tell you something about turning over your phone. Everybody knows this. No matter what, if you turn over your phone, you're going to come out a loser. You know why? Because if somebody thinks they need to look into your phone, then whoever does that is going to find the answer they're looking for, whether it's there or not. See, who's that? You just said you loved her. Who's this? Barbara? Yeah, that's my mom. Well, what you need to send her a text for?
She call you and she text you too much as it is.
Yeah, I'm not over here. She don't know I'm here, right? Seriously, no matter what, if the person who wants your phone is somebody who's gonna find a hole in the donut, no matter what hole happens to be in the donut, that is never gonna change. But why do you have to do this? Now, to be fair to McNair, the question may have been asked about Arian Foster, and McNair may have had the same exact answer, right? He didn't get to pick the hypothetical Houston Texan that was brought up. J.J. Watt happened to be the hypothetical Houston Texan that was brought up. Okay. At the same time, Bob McNair, I'm telling you guys, you aren't doing J.J. Watt any favors by acting like J.J. Watt is so much more honorable than everybody else. It's not helping him. It's going to make us not like him. It's already starting. And, yeah, Shannon, it's a little boring. It's not the most entertaining thing.
So you were telling me the story off air that he mentioned tonight about getting a certain amount of sleep?
I just saw this on Twitter. Apparently, because Hard Knocks is on, but you're not watching Hard Knocks because you're listening to us, damn it.
Thank you.
Let's see. Let me make sure I get this right for you. Get this quote right. This is from Tanya Ganguly of ESPN.com. Says, Easy Nwachukwu asks Watt for advice. Watt tells him he tried to get 10 hours of sleep in the offseason because Olympians do.
Oh. Wow.
First of all, what does Olympian mean? And this is why I say, what does Olympian mean? There's the cats that's out there in the decathlon, right? There's some cats that's out there swimming. There's dudes out there that's doing a whole lot of stuff. There's also cats that's shooting bows and arrows. And I could be underestimating the level of the cardiovascular endurance it requires and the skill it takes to shoot a bow and arrow. But they be out there in the Olympics shooting bow and arrows. There's people out there shooting pistols, right? Busting caps. I don't feel like you need 10 hours sleep to do that. It might help, but I don't feel like you need that.
You know what I want to see? I want to see it, right? I want to see it 8 Mile style. I want to see it on stage. J.J. Watt and Russell Wilson both on stage trying to one-up each other.
Yeah, going back and forth until the end where Russell Wilson says, I broke up with my wife to not have sex with Sierra. Ah! Ain't no coming back from that, right? Like, how you gonna top that, J.J. Watt? Let me know, what do you have that's competing with that? J.J. Watt probably looking at him like, fine, you can have it. You win. Fine. I have seen the limitations of who I am.
You got the juice now.
You got the juice. Who almost said something that would have got me fired. Yes, but yeah, he has the juice now. Like, once you wind up in that situation, you have the juice. But, hey, man, J.J. Watt, he would never destroy his cell phone. He might not, but I bet he ain't going to show up with it either. You know what J.J. Watt will get up there and say? I don't have a cell phone. Just like the pioneers. That's what he would say. Cell phone? What cell phone? I don't need a cell phone. My nearest neighbor lives 3 miles away from me, and I get on my horse, and I go knock on his
cabin,
door when
his
I
log
need
cabin.
something. Yeah, he's not leaving the house. Why do I need to leave the house? All I do is lift weights and chop wood. That's it.
Like a Rocky IV montage.
like Rocky got sent to the little house on the prairie.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt. Frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
Our next guest, he's here to talk with us about his book, his 25th anniversary pressing of it, called Friday Night Lights. You may have heard of it once or twice. It's been on the television and on the screen a few times. His name is Buzz Bissinger. Buzz, how are you?
Good. How you doing, man?
Hey, man, I'm doing all right. Glad to have you on to talk about this because Friday Night Lights, I think, is one of those books that a lot of people know. And now as a book, as a film franchise and with the television show, I wonder how familiar people are with kind of the nuances of the text itself. Is that a concern you have when you write a book that turns into a force like this one has become?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, frankly, people will mention the TV show in particular, and I'll say, well, I wrote the book. And they'll say, what book? I'll say, the book that started it all. Look, it's had a great ride. It sold about 2 million copies. It really has become, a timeless tale about sports in our country. But, a book is always trumped by a film and always then trumped by, a television show. But I got to say, Bomani, it's very rare to have 3 iterations that are as good as the book, the film, and the television show has been. So, I mean, I'm proud to be in good company.
Well, is there anything you look back on from the book, like now 25 years removed from it, that interests you even more now than it did when you were writing it?
Yeah, I mean, in the book, one of the key characters, really the main character, was a black running back named Boobie Miles. He was one of the best running backs in Texas. You probably know where this story is headed. He blew out his knee in his scrimmage before his senior season and was never the same after that, both physically. But the town just turned on him, because they saw him as, I hate saying this, but they sort of as kind of a football animal. That's all he was good for. That's all he was useful in terms of the town and the school. The racism directed at him was shocking. And the upshot is he's now in prison. He's had a really, really rough, difficult life. And I just think more than ever, a lot of kids who grow up thinking they're going to be pro football players or college football players they get thrown by the wayside at one point or another. And I think there's so much money involved now. There's so much on television. There's so much coverage that I think we lose sight of the fact that, this is a game in which the odds of making it to the pros are infinitesimal, less than 0.01%. And, what are we doing to our kids when all we teach them to believe is, you can be a great football player?
We're talking to Buzz Bissinger, the author of Friday Night Lights, and I've wondered because you've maintained a close relationship at least close, I don't want to be presumptuous, with Boobie throughout the years. What was it like for you, though, as your star was rising on this book and his life was going through the changes that it did?
Well, I made a commitment to Boobie both as a person and also, financially. I was aware of the fact that, look, the book would have been different without him. Obviously, he didn't write it and come up with the idea. But once his uncle died in 1998, I made a decision to help him out as much as I could, financially, in what I hoped was a constructive way. And gave him money not because, I'm a great white father, but because I felt he needed it. And we did do a ebook together and split the proceeds of that. Unfortunately, the money didn't, seem to help. It came in a lump sum, and in some cases it was sizable. And it was, it's true of all of us, including me. You get a lump sum of money, and the first thing you do is spend it, and then you wonder where the hell it went. But money went to Booby for a car, for education, but just nothing seemed to click. And when I saw him in prison, which was just a couple months ago, it's ag assault. It was with a relative. As cases go, there've been a lot worse, but Texas is tough. He violated probation and got a 10-year sentence. It was hard. I mean, he cried, I cried. We love each other. It was hard to see him end up where he did, but I can't say, I'm not surprised because of the lack of education. He got no education in high school. None. None at all. And the book chronicles this, and this is what happens when kids are encouraged to think football is more important than anything else.
We're talking to Buzz Bissinger, the author of Friday Night Lights, and very often people will ask me to recommend a book for them to read about race in America. And normally the first one I throw out actually is Friday Night Lights because I think it's as thorough an exposition as you have of all the factors that lead to race in America and then also specifically how they deal with sport. When you were writing the book, or you planned to, did you realize that you were going to write a story where race would be such a central factor?
No, because you got to remember, I didn't, I went in open-ended. I had access to the town, but I didn't know what would happen to Booby. But the second he got hurt, and I just saw people who loved him and talked highly about him. I thought he was the great next shining black hope for Permian High School. When they just turned on him and compared him to a horse coming up lame at the track, and what do? You take out a gun and shoot him, or he should shoot himself. And the use of the N-word, I mean, it was shocking and revolting, and it was just clear to me that this isn't just Odessa, Texas. This is all over the country where we perceive black kids to have no value beyond sports. And A, that's not true, and B, we as a society and we as a news media, which often sort of those the only role models that we give to black kids, we're doing them a terrible disservice. And I appreciate really what you're saying, because if you read the book, you'll see, what you end up with is a Booby Miles he's an intuitively smart kid. He could get an education, but, when you're not given an education, when you're basically paid to play high school football, when you're given answers to exams, and he's not the only one. The upshot is if you don't make it, and the odds are you will not make it, your life is going to be very, very difficult. And his has been, and it breaks my heart.
Well, there's also another level I thought was interesting about how he winds up at Permian, which was the way the school district lines were being drawn. Once schools were integrated, they were just getting enough guys. I grew up in Texas. I saw this all over the place. We get enough guys in the right neighborhoods to have a football team, and then that steers their lives, and they're basically being piped into the school only for what they can do for the larger body.
Yeah, and that was very, very true at the time. I mean, there were two high schools in town. Well, look, there was the school system was not desegregated until 1982. That's 1982, and that was by court order, so it wasn't voluntary. That's 28 years after School Board versus Brown. And so when they did it and when they had to redraw boundaries between the two schools, it's Odessa High and Permian High, it's a nice straight line. And then you see this kind of weird little square out, and that was basically a low-income housing project in the across the tracks that had a lot of good, black football players because it was the black side of town. And it was placed in the Permian District for the sole reason that it produced good football players. And that's look, you're from Texas. That happens all over Texas. Some of the biggest fights are over school boundaries and whether to build a high school and where it should be and how many students it should have. It should have freshmen and everything else. Look, high school football is well and alive all over the country. There's Allen, Texas, and everyone talks about it. Maybe it's unfair, but Bomani, they built a stadium that cost about $50 million for high school football. And by the way, it had foundation problems. They had to close it and rebuild it.
They are cathedrals. That's the interesting thing. It's funny. The high school I went to, they just built a new field for that one. The college down the street, Prairie View, where my parents taught growing up, they wish they could play in that high school stadium.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was true of Ratliff Stadium when it was built in the mid-'80s. people say, why'd you pick Odessa? Because I took one look at the stadium. At the time, there was nothing like it in Texas. $5.6 million and seating for 19,000 and an artificial surface field. But the thing about football, and it's there's nothing like it. I love the game. You and I could talk about this is wrong and that is wrong, but the game is really, really exciting, and that's what makes it so complicated because it does bring something to a community on a Friday night. That's why, as I said, the book is timeless. There's nothing like high school football. It's probably the one time on a Friday night where the community gathers together, regardless of what race and ethnicity they are. It's a great pageantry. It's a great spectacle. But, there is a dark side that Friday Night Lights was really the first to shine a light on, and it continues today.
All right, well, Buzz Bissinger, the author of Friday Night Lights, the 25th anniversary edition of the book is in stores now. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I really appreciate it. Thank you, man.